Opioids, Medicaid, end of session. We've got all this because we've got Jason Dunnington. It's all here right now. It's Mitchell Talks, the News 9 Sessions with Aaron Brillbeck. Look at this. Is this sartorially splendid or what? Anybody got a collection plate?
Feeling cute, might grill some politicians today, IDK.
I really appreciate that. It looks beautiful. It's absolutely stunning.
I'm feeling
beautiful.
cute.
Look at this, Representative Dunnington.
The three-piece is throwing me off a little bit, so yeah, stellar.
Only for you. I heard that you were going to be on the show today. I figured, you know what? I got to go three-piece for Dunnington.
Yeah.
There was a whole bunch that happened this week. This was a deadline week, and a lot of ground was covered. Let's talk a little bit about some of those first. Yeah. There's been a lot of problems between leadership, Republican leadership in the House and Senate. Looks like they were fighting primarily over two separate bills, one on the House side regarding the railroads, and one over in the Senate side regarding Senate leadership wanting a transparency agency set up.
You're saying the Republicans are fighting?
Republicans are fighting just a little bit. Just a little bit.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let's break down what is a deadline week.
Yep.
I think that's important to know. I mean, the general public, you say deadline week, and that doesn't make a lot of sense to them. But deadline for us is that you can basically break up the legislative session into three different pieces. The first piece, when the House hears all of their original bills, the Senate hears all their original bills. That's the first deadline week when you have to get those off of the respective floors. So we flip-flop bills. We've taken all the Senate bills. They've taken all the House bills. That's what this deadline week was about. It was about the last week to get those Senate bills back over to them and our House bills back over to us. At this point, if there were changes made on either side, we either accept those changes and hear fourth reading, at which it would be passed and go on to the governor, or if there were changes made because the other chamber didn't like what was going on, you have to reject those changes, take that bill to conference, continue to work on it, see if you can't get fourth reading in this last 4-week period. This last 4 weeks is the third part of session, which is bills in conference and working on the budget, which is coming up in the next week or so.
These two bills that led to this. Well, first of all, talk to me a bit about the friction that's going on in Republican leadership.
Yeah, so the friction is, I mean, it's not new to politics that you would have a party, especially when you have supermajorities, that you would have this type of friction. I can imagine that there was this type of friction in the 70s, 80s, 90s when Democrats were supermajority. Sure. Anytime that you get that many mouths to feed, you're going to get folks that are upset because everyone's wanting their own individual issue heard. Then you've got leadership that's going against one another. I think that stuff will get worked out. I mean, at the end of the day, the leaders that are in place are thoughtful people, intellectual people. They're going to get past some of this, but right now it's been pretty chippy in the building.
Speaker McCall was pushing for a bill that I think every single person in the entire city, the state of Oklahoma for that matter, really wanted this bill passed in terms of trains, because every single one of us, including myself this morning, has been stuck behind some train that's parked there blocking a major road for hours and hours and hours.
And he hadn't seen the sunshine since he don't know when.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. That's a Johnny Cash.
That's a Johnny Cash tune.
Okay,
Johnny
it's train
Cash
song,
tune.
sorry.
So his proposal was, let's fine these railroad companies $10,000, have the municipalities send a cop out there, write a ticket, that's going to cure the problem. Yeah, it probably would. And then the Senate yesterday passed a much more watered down version. Senator Smalley passed it, which is basically the exact same as what we currently have. Corporation Commission will investigate and will write a fine up to $1,000. So if I'm living up in the Panhandle someplace and there's a train that's blocking the ambulance that I'm in because I'm having a heart attack, the municipality that I'm in has to call the Corporation Commission. 3, 4, maybe 5 days later, they come out, they say, hey, there's no train, no fine.
Yeah.
And I'm dead.
Well,
and I'm dead.
Yeah.
Hopefully you're not having a heart attack somewhere in one of our rural areas right now because we've closed so many of our rural hospitals.
That's
you're probably
segue, right?
You're probably in trouble.
Subtle segue.
Anyhow, policy is such that you always have public perception. And so oftentimes we would say the public perception is reality. But, oftentimes in policy, there are other things that are taking place that just aren't being fully described. And so, whether or not that's the case on this issue with trains or not, There could be some of that in there, as well as some antics between leadership in the Senate, leadership in the House.
We talked with Senator Treat about that yesterday, and he says, there are other factors involved here. There are certain federal laws, there are certain state laws governing trains. To which my response is, well, if it was your wife that was in that ambulance, would you be saying, honey, you're going to die, but it's okay because we're complying with federal law?
My guess is if that bill weren't the Speaker's bill, that we probably wouldn't be talking about it as much.
My guess is you're right. You're absolutely right. On the other side, the Senate, Treat had been pushing a bill for the Office of Transparency, the LOFT, Legislative Office of Transparent something.
The Senate Bill 1, wasn't
Yep.
it? Yeah.
The irony of it is there's nothing transparent about it.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the irony about that building oftentimes. I know with Scott here on Your Vote Counts, we've talked about the question of transparency and accountability week after week after week. And what I always say on those two issues in particular is actions speak louder than words. Mm-hmm. We can pass 10 bills that talk about how transparent we are and not actually be transparent. So what I want to see from elected leaders is actual transparency in the way that they do things. And I think the public now is looking for that. So we can pass bills and talk about how transparent we are, but unless we're acting in a way that shows that reveals that, then it's just a bunch of words and on paper. So.
Hey, speaking of transparency, we talk about the media a lot and the short attention span, new shiny thing.
I'm sorry, what?
Opioid settlement thing, right?
What?
Opioid settlement.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's something that we've forgotten about. So, about 30 days, you can have an assassination 30 days later, they forget about it. And I'm not too hard on it because there's only so many people covering the Capitol, okay? You can get the Capitol media to and from the building in a short church bus. But the attorney's fees part of this opioid settlement, you could do a lot of good in Oklahoma for $60 million. Have you thought about just maybe these guys just donate this money that they made off this settlement? It's like a third of the money.
So again,
we're starting to read this.
We're talking about just the first part of the settlement. Mm-hmm. May 28th is when the court case is coming up, and there's still 3 other defendants that are in the case. When this is all said and done, the settlement could be some people have said could be as large as $3 to $5 billion with the other companies that are in. And the fees that are paid out for attorneys, they'll get the same percentage in all of the settlement. So you're talking about the $60 million off of the first $270 million settlement. Well, if that number goes up to $3 billion, then their attorney fees will increase up to $300 and $400 million.
These are the same attorneys that, by the way, were awarded a no-bid contract with the Attorney General, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
And there's all kinds of goobers became jillionaires back during the tobacco settlement that never saw the inside of the courtroom.
And there's nothing wrong with having a legal practice that focuses on this type of case and puts the effort in and spends the money up front. There is risk that's involved in that. There's nothing wrong with attorney groups that are doing that. That's needed as a check and balance in our society. But I think all of us could agree that being paid $300-400 million in a case of what would essentially be the state's money is probably a little egregious. I think that there's a way that you could both incentivize smart, thoughtful attorneys to run these cases, that they could still earn a good salary on doing so without paying these massive amounts of kind of egregious numbers when it comes to.
And we talked about this a couple weeks ago. Some of the media's been compromised on this. They really can't report on it. Objectively, so it's just a mess. Can we talk about Medicaid for just a second?
Yeah.
This is about to become a big issue, mainly because there's a ballot initiative out there looming, sort of like the medical marijuana. It might be taken away from the legislature and just put into the hands of the people. Can you give us an overview of what's happening with that?
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up the medical marijuana. Medical marijuana was something that the legislature talked about for years. There were bill after bill after bill that were brought up because what we heard from the public was, this is something that we want an option for. And so the legislature kept pushing it off, never would get a hearing in committee, never would be discussed. And then what happened, you saw a series of about 3 years in a row where the public ran initiative petitions to try and get it on the ballot. They took 2 swings at it, missed on those. The third one got it on the ballot. What happens? Passes first time out. Well, it passes based off the question they wrote. And then the legislature comes back in and talks about how bad it is and how we have to fix it. And we've spent, the better part of a year and a half working on policy to try and put something together that would make it better because the public passed it. The same thing's going to happen with Medicaid expansion. The public's been asking us now for 8 years to take our federal tax dollars back from Washington and put them into effect to help our citizens in the state of Oklahoma. We don't have to do full-blown Medicaid expansion here. We could do an Oklahoma plan. We could do that today if we wanted to. We've had talks about it for 8 years, but politics have kept us from doing it from that period until now. Now that there's an initiative petition that's out, if that goes on the ballot, it will pass. Because Oklahomans, when they go in private to check a ballot, and they know that it'll provide health care that they need for their family or their neighbor or someone they go to church with, someone that they know works hard but just can't afford health care, it will pass. And it'll either pass in full-blown Medicaid expansion from D.C., or we can do it in the legislature in a way that works best for Oklahoma.
Are you saying that if the legislature had taken time to craft the medical marijuana bill, it might not be what it is today, which is, dude, let's not anybody fool ourselves. It's wide open.
Yeah.
Okay, it is wide open. And so I don't even know why we want to discuss doing complete legalization, because it's out
already
there.
here.
It's already here. Okay, let's
Dude.
make no mistake about it. Anybody who says otherwise, you ain't got reality on your front plate. So this Medicaid deal, your fear is if we do the backwards thing on that it could have, you could spend years trying to fix the thing, put it together the way it would work good, but you need the legislature to move first on this, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest fears about Medicaid expansion that I hear from colleagues is that, well, the federal government, it's a 90% match. So the federal government gives 90%, we give 10. And the big fear is that the federal government will pull the rug out and all of a sudden they won't do the 90% match.
They've been saying that for 8 years.
We'd be on the hook
Right.
for the whole thing. Well, not only have our U.S. senators said that it'll be funded for the next 10, 20 years at least, but that's one of the things that if the legislature built it ourselves, we could put that as part of the policy. We could put in statute that would say if the federal government lowers the match from 90 down at all, that we would be able to reevaluate our program.
You get to warranty the program, is what you're saying.
If you pass it on the ballot, you don't have some of those protections. And so we can't use common sense in the way that we can if lawmakers build thoughtful policy, which is what we should do. That's what we're elected to do. That's what our constituents are asking us for. But we've allowed the politics of healthcare to keep us from doing what's in the best interest of people. And that's really a shame.
This is going to be a hard question, but what should that expansion look like? Should Oklahoma legislators put it together and want it to pass through both houses?
We should want to do it. That is our job. We should revel with the opportunity to build a policy that's good for Oklahoma citizens instead of forcing them to do our job for us with a ballot measure. It should have a caveat in of if the federal government decreases their match. It should. I mean, that just makes sense.
Sure.
It should have a caveat in there of how do we fund it. Whether or not we fund it through new taxes or whether or not we fund it through fees on hospitals, which is the way that the legislature would likely do it. There could be things in there. The state of Kansas, we've talked about this, I think, on your vote counts. The state of Kansas had a caveat in theirs where you had a monthly copay. So if you were an individual, working individual, or a single with one child, it would be $25 a month. If you were a family of 6, it could be up to $100 a month. I think that people understand that there should be some skin in the game when it comes to healthcare. It's a cost for all of us and our families, and those of us that have the good fortune of having a company that helps cover the cost of it understand that, but those that pay for their own out of pocket understand that. I don't think it's too much to ask that there would be a monthly cost for people in the Medicaid program. As long as it was a low enough threshold that people could still get the insurance they need. Those are the kinds of things we could do if we build the policy. If we let it go to a ballot initiative, we'll just take whatever copy and paste Medicaid expansion there is out of Washington, D.C., lay it over Oklahoma and say we're done. And then people will be upset about it.
Here's the problem, though. The clock is running out. Session's only so long. You've got, 4 weeks, give or take?
Yeah, the clock's been running out, though, for 8 years. We've left over $10 billion on the table of our taxpayer dollars in Washington, D.C. because we've been ineffective here in the state. I mean, at the end of the day, I think that citizens want their elected leaders to put the party politics stuff aside, do what's in the best interest of citizens, and then move forward. And I really do think that's what people want.
I think we ought to ask you about Bernie Sanders. One final question. We talk about civility for just a moment.
Sure.
Or lack thereof.
Yeah, would you describe yourself as somewhat liberal in your positions as a Democrat?
I would say that I'm liberal in a number of my positions as a Democrat.
Do you think you ought to be able on social media in your position as a leader and your representative to weigh in on national contests?
Yes. I mean, to the extent that I have a thought or an opinion on something like that. I mean, I try to focus as much as I can on state politics because this is what actually affects our citizens here. Largely what happens in D.C. is, that's for cable news fodder. That's not on the ground what's helping citizens here in the state of Oklahoma.
Do you think when you share those on social media that people are going to respond to you in a rational, civil way? Can I answer that question?
Yeah, answer that question for me, Scott.
Hell no.
Yeah.
That's not what happens. Just take a look at this.
Yeah, that's pretty insane.
Just give us an idea of what it feels like to be on the receiving end. Many people, by the way, we've seen, since you made your statement about Bernie Sanders, we've seen many people saying, I don't know if they were following you on Twitter or what, but saying the same thing about Bernie, but that Bernie army with this insane attacks that they're making on people that just dare to compare him as the polar opposite of Trump, it's crazy. That's the way to, isn't that the way you'd say it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey to have made a comment about Senator Sanders on Twitter and see people's thoughts on that.
He's not even a Democrat.
It's,
Right.
Did you know?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I've made that point as well. If you want to run as a Democrat, and you did 2 years ago, you've had 2 years that you could have joined the party and been a part of the community that calls themselves Democrat, and you didn't. Except when you wanted to run for president again, then you use that platform and disparage everyone else that's not you. I see that as problematic. I also recognize that 2 years ago, there were only two choices. It was Bernie Sanders or it was Hillary Clinton. There's as many as 20 options right now, and that's just going to play out so differently in the 2020 cycle for Democrats. I mean, you have so many more options to choose from in the Democratic primary right now.
But are you surprised, though, at the heat that you got from this?
I guess I'm not surprised. I mean, it's social media, it's Twitter and Facebook. I mean, as a sociologist, I tell people that those things are only real to the extent that you allow them to be. Real is this: it's sitting in front of a human being, talking, person to person, understanding that if I have a disagreement with one of you all, I have to have it with you in person, and it gets uncomfortable. So if we start to yell at each other or get agitated, I can see that on your face. Mm-hmm. I can see I'm making you uncomfortable. I mean, I make Scott uncomfortable all the time.
Daily.
But you see that in human interaction, and so you change, you mitigate your position, and that allows you to hear each other, or at least that's the hope. It allows you to hear each other so that you can accomplish something.
You can't do that from Mom's basement.
You can't do that from Mom's basement. I mean,
Ride
you
the
can
keyboard.
be keyboard warrior all day long and never get anything accomplished.
Next time, do something safe on social media, like talk about anti-vaxxers. Just kidding. Please don't. That's the only ones I know that are even more aggressive on social media. Hey, thanks for your time.
Yeah.
This weekend, we wanted you to come in and see the new Aaron Brobeck, who is.
I mean, this is dapper. I hope he's got a bowler
dapper.
out, like waiting for him when Goes out to the
A
car.
little monocle for the eye.
Yes, a monocle.
Can't wait for your next Bernie Sanders tweet. Hey, thanks for watching Mitchell Talks the News 9 Sessions with Aaron Brillbeck. And if Senator Sanders were here, he would say to you, and so you can see us again at news9.com/yourvotecounts and follow Mitchell on Twitter @MitchellTalks. Now I'm going to get the hate.
It's a good beating.
Yeah,
Bernie.
it's coming.
Good Bernie.